Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for all the waves and the support. I thought I would do something a little bit different today and start a lot of these sessions as a live, I'd say kind of like a podcast live stream, and just see how they go and also how they start to help out a lot of the other developers that are in this space. And I've been seeing a lot of talk at the moment about Bun. There seems to be quite a lot of excitement out there, and I definitely don't want to be too negative as well. I have seen some good differences of opinion, but we should also take a look at .NET and in particular .NET Core while we're there, and I would say do a good comparison. And what I'm going to do today is really run through how to kind of set up both of these APIs and do a comparison really around performance testing, kind of all of the steps to go through and to test that. But also I think the main thing we're going to be learning today will be how do we set up our environments and how do we actually go through using these new technologies to get the most out of them. So also a big hello to all of the Arcanus crew as well. Yeah, big smiley faces, everyone out there, and Filipino land, and also some of our Canadian friends just north of the border in the US, including May. So yes, May, hey, how you doing? Thanks for joining. It might be a little bit technical today, but I promise that hopefully we should get some value out of it around sort of deploying our solutions and how to speed up those things as well. So it's been quite a bit of a deep dive today. So yes. All right. So without further ado, let's kick into really why we're here. And the main reason is to set up a project in each and then to go through those steps. So what I wanted to do was to take us across to GitHub for the moment. And probably the first thing I want to show you guys is, as we're using Bun, one of the things that we need to be conscious of is that the majority of the workflow is done, or probably the best developer experience is on a Linux machine. If you've got a Windows machine, it means that you can install WSL, which is kind of like a Linux operating system on Windows, but I found the better experience is with code spaces in GitHub. So if you haven't seen what code spaces are, I'm going to run through that. They're quite exciting, and I think I think you'll get quite a bit out of it. So at the moment, I'm in my GitHub repository. Now, I think to have code spaces, you need to be a paying customer, but just as a heads up, I'm only paying it's like $5 or $10 a month anyway. So, and it enables a lot of these features. And I'm not sure if you get for free some of the smaller servers, but what I'll do is I'll just show you what this looks like anyway. So at the moment, I'm on a Warp API repository. Inside on the sort of this code button here, you get the ability to click on either create a code space, or I've already got one code space that's running. But if you wanted to go through and create one, you can either click the plus button, or you could click the plus with new options. So I could go through and say that I want a 2-core machine, and it's basically like a virtual machine that will run your code. But the coolest thing about this is that if I click the 3 dots, rather than sort of just, I could click on that and get taken to a web view of Visual Studio Code, but I'm actually going to click open in and then open in Visual Studio Code. And what that's going to do is open up my Visual Studio, but it's going to create this great tunnel through from Visual Studio straight across to code spaces. So at the moment, I'm operating Visual Studio locally on my machine, but I'm doing dev, if that makes sense. And when I'm testing, I'm actually doing it on a Linux operating system. So it gives me far more flexibility to work with Bun, and also to check what it's going to be like working with .NET Core on a Linux machine as well. So just so we get a really good test between the two. So I'd say without further ado, I think let's go and do some coding and see what this is going to look like. So all right, so I've got my 2 folders just up here on the left. So we've got Bun and Core. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through these steps quite quickly around how to set up each. And the one I'll do first is the core API version. So if I type in .NET on a Git machine, .NET Core is actually already installed, which is amazing. So we've got .NET Core, we've got, we do need to install Bun, but we also have a bunch of other tools like Docker that already come with it out of the box, which is kind of really cool. So let's get started. So I'm going to go .NET, and let's just check our Microsoft Docs to make sure we do the right one first. New Web API. And this is really for back-end type work. So if we're building APIs and those things, this is really going to be all for like that kind of work as we're building our front ends to work with our back ends. So that should have created that. Yep, that's done. And so here's my .NET project, and I might just zoom in just a little bit just so we can see that a little bit easier. Here's my .NET project. There's my program CS file. It's, as you'll see, it's a very similar language to if you used to TypeScript, but there are some little nuances. So the first thing is that .NET does do something quite well, which is it creates Swagger definitions. I'll cover that in a sec. But one thing we're going to need to do is it kind of creates a boilerplate weather forecast controller. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create just a very simple hello world example, and then we're going to do some performance testing across it. So let's see, do I want to install C# extensions? Yes, I do, just to make C# a little bit nicer. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to jump up to our controllers. We're going to rename this controller for the moment from weather forecast to hello world controller. And anywhere else I see weather forecast, I'm just going to change that to be hello world. So let's just go do that. Get hello world. That's not as relevant though. Okay, and here's the first method that .NET calls. So there's a little bit of magic behind .NET. I think probably the biggest difference as I'm starting to compare the two of these, and this is now talking about like developer experience. .NET does a few little kind of things in the background that you don't know. So there's a bit of magic there, but on the other side of things, I think we get quite a lot of like boilerplate and out of the box stuff with .NET. On the flip side, Bun is, in my opinion, and just I guess TypeScript and Node in general, we get a lot more flexibility, but sometimes it means we need to write a little bit more. Sometimes we have to write more in .NET. So you kind of have to do a bit of do your own comparison between the two. But in this instance, I'm just going to get rid of this code. I'm just going to return a hello world, and I have to be in .NET. We always have to say what kind of type we're returning. So type is a string, it's a get command. And the last thing we need to do is just rename this to be a hello world controller. Just want to say thanks for the good vibes, Karen. Awesome. So now we've got a hello world controller. If I jump down here, in this program.cs file, it says map controllers. What .NET's actually doing there is it's going to its controllers directory and importing in all of our controllers. So we don't have to kind of manually go through and import everything. It just does a lot of this stuff in the background. We don't need these. We're not really using a logger. And this weather forecast, we don't need that anymore. So let's delete that. And then the last thing, let's just check our CS proj. Yep, core API. App settings looks good. App settings development looks good. Okay, cool. So I think at this point, we can now test this out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in the command line, say .NET run. And that'll go away and build and compile down. And when .NET's building and compiling, it's building out to these bin and obj or object directories. So this is something you might just notice here. This said open in browser. Because we're working in code spaces, what it's done is it's run on the virtual machine at port 5165. It's it's running that instance, but it's now created a tunnel through to our machine so that if we wanted to, I can go ahead, come over here, go to my local host and go hello world, if I can spell it correctly. And it's like running on my machine. So now that we've got this hello world example running, let's go and do the same in Bun and start doing some comparisons. So that one's done. And let's jump back over to Bun. And let's go and create a new Bun installation. So I think it's init. Yeah, that's what I want to do. Run from index.ts. Okay. All right, hello via Bun. There we go. And if you look at the bun.sh site, it's got a good example for really a hello world startup script. So let's jump across to our quick start. This is what I'm looking for here. I'm going to copy that. Serve, when we fetch at the root, let's do hello world. And let's now go bun run index.ts. That's on that VM, it's 3000, it's ported through. So I'm going to open now up 3000 and there we go. We've got our hello world that's serving from Bun. Cool. So that's basically two different versions of the same system. And before I start to do some performance testing, I just want to address a couple of things here. You can kind of see the simplicity in Bun. We've got basically one file. And one thing that Bun does talk about is, it talks about, if you want frameworks that have a little bit more baked in, Elysia.js is a new API framework. It's probably one of the fastest ones. But really, when you look at the code, it'll be quite similar. There's not a lot of code here that needs to run that package. And when you compare that to .NET Core, we've got a program file. We've got a lot of different things in here. We've got a lot of different setup files. We've got our controller. And yes, there's probably some logging code we don't need here, but I would say that there still is a little bit more code when it comes to .NET. And that's the main experience I've generally found. I do think .NET Core has done a great job at really restricting the amount of things that you need, so you don't have to import as many things. But in comparison, I would say that that's probably the thing I've noticed so far. But outside of that, the next step really is, all right, now that we've built those two frameworks, how do we performance test them? So one way we can do it, and this is what I like to do, especially when I'm working on, because we want to make sure that when we're performance testing, we're looking at one machine only. It's kind of like that one environment that has the same specs, same CPUs, cores, everything else like that, just so that we're really getting an apples for apples comparison. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my local machine to fire off all of the requests, and then I'm going to test both of these servers and see how they go. Now, I know the first thing you'll probably say is it's not quite a like-for-like comparison, because .NET will usually run on IIS or a server. But then I'd also say if we're going to do that, we'd probably also need to host the Bun installation on a server behind, like kind of a battle-tested server like Nginx, Apache, whatever it be. Well, I'm not going to do that today, but I think that's something that you guys should think about in the future. So in the meantime, let's do some performance testing, and I'll show you how to do that as well, especially when we're working with APIs. And this works just as well if you're doing it on front-end applications as well. If you need to test a page load, if you want to shoot a lot of requests at a page and see how many requests fail, how many come through. So, all right, give me 1 second, I'll pull that up. finding the command. All right, here we go. This is what I'm looking for. So I've installed AUTOCANNON on my machine. If you haven't got AUTOCANNON, just npm install AUTOCANNON and just make sure it's global. But once you've got that, you can run AUTOCANNON. I find these to be some of the best settings. This basically means that we're doing it over 40 seconds. We've got kind of 100 connections, I think, stepping up, and you'll see a bit more once we actually run this. So why don't we test .NET Core first? So let's go .NET run. See that we've got something up and running. There's our hello world. So go. And now what this will do over the next 40 seconds, it'll start with like 100 connections and kind of step them up bit by bit. And it'll run all of those tests and start to report back to us on how many failures there might have been, how many went through, what the maximum requests per second we could do. Keeping in mind as well that this is working on a server. I think this server is like a 2-core, 8 gig RAM code space. So that's kind of like the settings that we're running with. There we go, there's our results. So we had 185,000 requests in that 30 seconds, and the average was about 4,500 requests per second. So that's what we're running with .NET when we run a quick hello world type example. So based on that, let's do a quick comparison between our bun version that we have as well. Sure it's fully turned off. Yes, we are. Okay, bun run index.ts. Awesome, there we are. Now these tests will vary between the times of day that you run them, and also the VM, it might be experiencing additional load, or the VMs in general. But generally speaking, if you run this, I'd say 3 or 4 different times, you'll start to get some pretty good averages and be able to work out what's probably the better performing system of the two. All right, and while we're waiting on that, any questions on the live stream side? If you want to raise a question, jump in and leave something in the chat. I've got my Slack up. What did I get? I did have something I saw before. Question from May. Yes. So yes, you can share this with other devs. Anything to help the channel. That's what I'm going to say. Awesome. So yeah, done. Okay, so straight off the bat, we can see that between the two, Bun was able to do an extra 400 average requests per second. I think when I last checked, it was kind of like a 10-15% additional it could do. It was able to do an additional 14 to 15,000 requests per second. But what I have noticed with Bun is that the more that you increase the server specs, the more that number starts to go up, and how it's able to, just in a really rudimentary setup, it's able to outperform .NET. And I think these numbers will start to become more comparable when we put .NET onto an IIS server. We get the full advantages of .NET, but I also think we need to do another video where we talk about Bun hosted as well, behind potentially a reverse proxy like Nginx or something. Yeah. So, okay, so what we've run through now is basically setting up 2 projects, going through performance testing them, and getting some of the results back. So at the moment, I'm pretty impressed by Bun, but I think we can do a little bit better than this, right? Because the one thing I've noticed between the 2 of these platforms is we're not just talking about speed and like that's only really one side of it. I think the other part of this platform that I'm seeing that's quite good compared to .NET is some of the other developer experience improvements that we have with Bun. So one thing I do want to talk about is that out of the box, Bun has the ability to test, and it runs very similar to V-test or Jest type tests. And it kind of comes baked in with a whole lot of that framework already. So one thing I'd say is if we were going to start actually moving forward and using this as a platform, I'd like to show you how easy that can be. So let me just grab my Visual Studio, and I'm just going to go and jump into one of my previous solutions and grab some of the code. Apologies, guys. I should have had this ready before I rocked. But that's okay. All right. We have a nice comparison. Apologies, guys. Just looking for my test file. Nearly there. Okay. So let's go and create a test file. So let's go and test a So out of the box, if we jump across to the Bun documentation, we come down here, we'll start to see some of these out of the box type tests. So you don't need to install anything, it already comes out of the box with that. I've said that probably a few times too many, but you know, it is what it is. So let's go and define a few tests and we'll go from there. Okay. So straight out of the box, I can start to write unit tests. And if I was going to be using this, I would still kind of adopt a slight test-driven approach to this. So let's just say I've got a service class. I would instantiate that class and I'd already start to run the methods before I've even really put the methods in place. So if I'm building some back-end things, let's go and create a services directory. Let's create a test service.ts class. We're going to export the default test service. And then in here, we've got our constructor. And we're also going to have method. Let's just create a async method that's called test, and it's going to return false for now. Test. Cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to import that. services, test service. At some point we'll get to this, but for now in this demo, let's just stick with the default import way. We're going to go and create that new test service. And let's expect that const response equals test dot test, because that's the function. Expect that the response is true. So we want that response to be true. At the moment, we're actually testing it negatively. So if I was doing some test-driven development, I would start running these tests almost immediately. And expect must be called in a test. So, of course, I just have to remember the syntax. Test, that's right. Let's grab one of our tests. Everyone who's testing way more often than me, I apologize. All right, so we've done test 2 + 2. Now I like to kind of do this thing where I go, I'm checking maybe test service, kind of remind me where I'm up to. That's when I'm describing things. Awesome. Run test. I don't know if you guys just saw that. Did you see how fast that was? Like, I think from a developer experience point of view, this is where they're talking about the speed of things. So the first thing was when we go bun dev, mun run index.ts. The time that it took to actually fire up everything was lightning quick. And now, that's probably one thing I kind of glazed over a little bit, but when you compare that to .NET, it's not even a comparison. .NET is, 4 seconds, 8 seconds. Once it's cached everything, maybe it's a little bit sooner, but Bun is just lightning fast at doing that stuff. So when I also run Bun test, if you've run vtest or any of those things before, you're not used to that, where it's literally giving you everything straight away, like your results almost immediately. I think that to me is probably one of the coolest things. I'm just going to rename this just to kind of test, just so we can see a little bit better. Yeah, cool. Expected true, got false. So let's go and change our method. We'll do some stuff there. And if I wanted to continually run this, I just need to run the watch command. And then as I start to update my files, it'll rerun my tests every single time. So it's watching all of my files, all of my services, all of my backend code, and it's consistently running testing, which is awesome, right? So now that we've done that, we're kind of getting to this point where test-driven development, we can start to use it in I'd say, in a way that's not as time consuming as if you follow full TDD. What I mean by that is we can write just the required tests for the unit tests. We can test our APIs, integrations, other bits and pieces, and we get results back really quickly. So in terms of developer time, we're not waiting 30 seconds, 40 seconds for these results. We're getting them back in, 11 milliseconds, 20 milliseconds. So it's quite cool. So that's what I would start to do in terms of testing. And I would start to describe functional areas for our tests. And we might be like testing services here. And I do want to give a quick shout out to a developer friend of mine, Nix, who I think is on the call going live. Yes, you are, Nix. There you are. Yeah, light bulb moment, isn't it? That by doing this, we can start to split this up and really identify any particular areas that have issues. And then as we go to build our machines and release them for production, we're making sure that every time we build something that we're testing all of our services properly. So as developers, that's more of our responsibility, I believe. I don't think it's the tester's responsibility. And then we can start to use our testers for more of that exploratory testing, end-to-end, and high-level integration. So they will save our bums when it comes to that stuff. But I think as devs, we get to do a bit more testing, and it's not hurting us because, I mean, really 11 milliseconds is nothing. It's not like we're waiting 40 anymore. So really cool, that is, with Bun. So now that we've done these two things, the other thing I did want to talk about was releasing Bun. Like, how do we actually get this out and onto a production type server? So if I'm a team of developers and I want to show some quick wins and some quick results, that can be quite, how do I best describe it? It can be quite frustrating because it feels like we're constantly blocked, waiting for access, waiting for servers, waiting for resources. So I'm just going to run you guys through how I like to deploy my solutions. This is one of the cheaper ways, and I find that the user interface is really good. I like working with this interface alongside Bun or a .NET Core. Even if we still need to deploy our production versions to whether it's Amazon or Microsoft Azure, I still like these as our kind of like our dev machine. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about DigitalOcean. And there's a few other platforms that work really well, but I'm going to pick on DigitalOcean here because I just think it's amazing. I think it's super easy to work with. We don't need to hire DevOps people. So developers can now use DevOps solutions, which was really, in my opinion, what it was intended for right at the start. It was developers using this DevOps stuff so we don't have to talk to IT and ask them to create servers for us. Who would have thought? Anyway, I'll get off my high horse. Let's deploy this Bun API solution. So if I run the Docker command, I should actually get, so Docker's already installed on this machine. So I'm going to go and steal a Docker that I've done previously. I'm going to paste it in here, and I'm going to show you how to use Docker, how to build a Docker machine, how to deploy that machine, and how to turn on continuous integration. A lot of seniors will keep this close to their heart. I think we need to share it, and I think anyone should be able to do this. So yeah, this is free learning. So we've got our Docker file. What I'm going to do, we're going to take this from a location. So think of it like it's pulling it from like a Git registry, which it really is. But this is the name of that image. So we're pulling it from oven Bun. Thanks, Bun, guys. Hilarious. If we wanted to use Node or something, I think it's like Node, 16. There's like other types of, you could do Ubuntu. All of these images are kind of all available if you go to Docker Cloud, but for now, the official one for Bun is oven Bun. Our working directory is app. I'm going to copy my package JSON and my Bun file, my Bun lock file. I'm going to copy all of the contents in here. I'm going to run a Bun install, and then I'm going to expose a port. So before I do anything, I just need to double check which port this was exposing. And I'm pretty sure, it's 3000. So I'm going to expose port 3000. And then we're going to put it in we're going to run a command, which is basically on this Docker image, Bun prod. Problem is, we don't really have that yet. When I look at like my scripts, I've got nothing in there. So what I've done in a few of my other projects is create those scripts just to kind of make it a little bit easier. So let's pop that in now. So when I run dev, it's gonna run my index.ts file, but it's going to put it in a watch mode so that it auto runs. And prod is going to do exactly the same thing, but it's just going to run it in a production mode where it's not watching. Test watch is going to run tests in a watch mode. And let's go and try that out. Bun prod. Yep, that works. Cool. So Back to our Docker file, exposing port. We know this command now runs. I think we're ready to deploy this and start to test it. So because Bun is so quick, you're going to see again how fast it is to create a Docker image. So I'm going to go Docker build -t. I'm going to name my image. The little trick here, if you haven't done this before, whenever you come into DigitalOcean and you go to the container registry and you create a new container registry, it'll give you a name for that registry. I've given this one Prime CC because the work we're doing is with Prime. Amazing company, check them out, primecc.com.au. They do a lot of compliance in the ASIC space and they're creating some really cool tech. So I'm going to build T. I'm going to name my image Prime CC / and let's call this bun test space dot. Dot just means run this file here. If I wanted to run a different file, I'd go -f and then put the file in. Is the Docker daemon running? It should be. Be sure. Build. Is the Docker daemon running? So usually, yes, the Docker daemon is running, and I can see it. Let's have a look and see if. Yep, build an image, Docker, build. Let's just see. All right, well, I won't be able to show you that one today, guys. But basically what that would do is, let me just pull up my Docker images to see if I've got any running at the moment. Docker list. This containers is PS. But usually I'd see a few of those containers in there. Once we had run that Docker command, if it let us do that, and I'll work this out off air. Once we had done that, then the very next step that we can do is we can go Docker push that image, and we would have done bun test. As we had to push that, it would have pushed to this location, similar to these ones I've got here. So I've got an image here, and then the very next step after that would be to click on apps, create an app. And this is, we're creating an app from that Docker image. We're going to get it from our DigitalOcean container registry, and we would have seen that bun test in here if that last step had worked. I think maybe the Docker service isn't running properly on that machine. I might need to restart it. But I'd click, say, the repo I want. I'd choose the tag to be latest, and this is the most important part for everyone who's watching. Make sure you click auto deploy. Okay. Once you've clicked auto deploy, you go next, you kind of go through all of it. What you're going to have is an application that's now live. So I'll give you an example of this. 0ms is one of the services that I've recently released. If I click into that app and I click on it, and I go to the app, now see that a container that I've built, I've pushed it to the DigitalOcean registry, is now running live. And this is really cool for like releasing things quite quickly, because now that I've gone through all of those steps, if I wanted to go and update that 0 microservice, which is actually this one here, all I need to do is to build that Docker container again and push it, and it will automatically update that live URL. and it will handle a lot of the downtime aspect. So what that means is that it releases, there's really no downtime, and it's kind of like replacing things in the background. And once it's really done everything, it does a quick hot swap over from the old version to that new version. And the new version might be just as something as simple as, in my server.ts file, on that up command, I might just say, hi live stream, 0 heartbeat up. And I want that to display, rather than saying this, I want it to say, hi live stream, everything's up. And I'm just gonna double check to see if I can potentially release that for you guys, just to kind of show you that last step. I think it's going to give me the same error. I'm just hoping maybe that because I'm in a different directory that it will work, but let's see. Docker build, I'm going to release to the container registry. I'm going to release it over the top of our 0 server. So let's just go and get that. Zero MS. Let's double check the service status here. And let's see. Oh yeah, okay, cool. But if that was up and running, what would have happened is this would have gone through, updated our Docker image here. So rather than just seeing that one image, you'd actually have 2 images. This one would then become the previous image. The one I would have pushed, that one with the extra bit of text, would now become the latest. And the cool thing about this is, especially in DigitalOcean, they've handled this really well. When I jump into that 0 MS service, you can see all of the deployments. If I jump into the activity here, I can roll back. So if I've released something that didn't quite work properly, and now it's live, and then we've figured that out, rather than having to bug fix and do a whole lot of work, we can just roll back to the previous Docker image that we knew worked. And we might have known it worked because it passed all the tests, the end-to-end tests, all those other things. So as soon as I click rollback, this URL will be updated with the previous version. And I apologize in advance, guys, I couldn't show you all of that stuff, but I think that really does show you that end-to-end of building a service, whether it's in .NET or whether it's .NET Core, sorry, or whether it's in Bun, Dockerizing then your code into a container that has a command that runs that exposes the port, going from there, building the container, pushing it, which is really like pushing a commit to our container registry, whether that's in DigitalOcean or wherever else it is, and then running an app from it. So I know, for a few people, I know that might be a little bit boring. We've all done it before, but I think that kind of was a good example of all of the different steps that we had to go through to get an app up and running and live. And if you're having some heartache and some issues with, just in general, working with your company's IT people getting the servers or getting access to certain things, I really think DigitalOcean is a really good alternative for developers. It's cheap. We can get servers for about $5 a month. They actually are still quite good. It can take quite a bit of throughput. And the advantage, again, with containers is we can start to, rather than making these servers that are really big this way and lots of CPUs and power, we can start to go this way. We have lots of containers and we can start to load balance between those containers. And we can start to leverage easy, like automated deployments and rollbacks. And I think the more advanced part of all of this would be, and that next step is taking that to the next level, where every time we check in code to either the dev environment, test environment, it would actually go on all those kind of temp commands I was running, it would go and run all of those commands on the fly. So you wouldn't even have to think about building a Docker image. That's pretty much it, what I wanted to, I guess, share with you guys today, and why I think the developer experience is pretty cool inside Bun. One thing I didn't cover was that it can also create executable files in Linux. I think they're working on that either, or they have finished it in Windows, so it can create an exe file. So your API could potentially be an exe that you can just build it. The other thing I've also performance tested is building from Bun. If I build that TypeScript and compile it down to JS, was there any performance differences or increases? The answer is actually no. I found in most cases running TypeScript straight from the Bun engine was just as fast, no matter how big the machine was that I was running. So if someone has different results, I'd love to hear it. But yeah, on the whole, I think the developer experience is pretty cool. And I think the one caveat I'll say here is that as we're starting to look at using Bun over, or potentially over .NET, the one little caveat I'd say is .NET has a great community. It's highly battle tested and it's very well used. So if you're building a backend or an API solution that requires, I would say, connecting to databases, quite a lot of secure type stuff, have a look at the Entity Framework and .NET Core. And I would consider it, I think, if you've got quite a complex enterprise style application. But if you're building something that is going to use, you might be proxying or calling a few different APIs and maybe a few lightweight databases, and you're not potentially doing a whole lot of enterprise type stuff, I would say really consider Bun. And I think that even though Bun has only got this tiny minuscule portion of the entire ecosystem at the moment, I think that's going to grow quite a bit. I think it's a really good contender to take over from Deno and Node. And I've tested Deno, and I still think Bun holds that spot. So yeah, thanks for staying with me, guys, today. Before we wrap up, I'm just checking out some of the comments. Thanks, Karen. Yeah, it was pretty cool. I totally agree. Nick's agreed. Also to Ron, hey, how you doing? Yeah, it was definitely an eye-opening exercise. Yep, and agreed. Yeah, there was some pretty cool stuff. Lakesh, hey, how are you, mate? For you guys, is there anything or any questions you've got before we close up? If you've got anything to talk about, or any sort of ask me anything type questions, pop them into the live chat now, and I'll have a look. If not, we'll wrap up, and I'll just give you guys maybe another 10 or so seconds and see if we get anything else through. Well, you're welcome, Nix. Cheers for hanging around. Okay. All right. Well, let's call it there. Hope to see all you guys at the next one. Otherwise, thanks for tuning in. And yeah, looking forward to the next installment of Adam Neon. And I'm kind of thinking this should be called something like The Code Show. It rhymes, but I don't know. We'll see. All right, guys. Take care.